From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's the week of March 22nd, 2021. Pretty exciting episode for us at Sox Machine, as for the first time we will have a show available both in our normal podcast feed, but also on our YouTube channel. The difference between the two is obviously we'll have more visuals that pair with our analysis about the Chicago White Sox. So if you enjoy the show on your podcast listening routine, don't worry, nothing is changing for you. But if you are someone that likes to watch shows on YouTube, well, now you can watch the Sox Machine Podcast. With that news aside, this episode will focus quite a bit on the 2021 preview of the Chicago White Sox outfield. It's a unit that has a lot of potential with Eloy Jimenez and Luis Robert, an intriguing platoon in right field with Eaton and Engel. But injuries are always a factor, and none of the four outfielders are strangers to the injured list. How will this unit fare in 2021? We'll break it down later in the show. But first, we recap the week that was for the Chicago White Sox spring training, and it's a good time to introduce the co-host of the show. He's the managing editor of SoxMachine.com. It's Jim Margulis. Welcome as far as to the video format. For those that are listening to the podcast version, you didn't get a chance for me to bring Jim in. It's not quite like Chris Collinsworth at NBC Sports Chicago, where you literally saddle in. Unfortunately, we're not. Saddle in. But yeah, very exciting. Hello. And it's nice to see you.
Yeah, likewise. I think we should take this opportunity to just make a lot of visual jokes, talk about me doing this and this. Note to the listener, I am doing nothing.
And for the listener, if you're wondering, does Josh have any Dr. Pepper? You know that I always have a bottle of Dr. Pepper next to me. So again, nothing much has changed, except now we have a video format of the podcast. So very exciting times. I'm in transition. You're probably thinking this is the worst background, Josh, to have a YouTube show. I apologize. I'm in the middle of moving. So in a couple of weeks, I'll be in our new studio.
I should make that my Zoom background after you move.
Just the bed right here. I got the Carson Fulmer Birmingham Baron bobblehead.
Nice. It's like, Josh is in his new podcast studio, and I'm in Josh's old bedroom.
Oh man. All right. So yeah, poking fun at where we are as far as recording the video side of things. And this is when you're doing podcasts, nobody can see this, so it doesn't really matter. But I promise you, in a couple of weeks, things will be better. As far as visually behind me, once I am done moving, which of course is a great idea to always move right before opening day. But we are getting closer to opening day, Jim, for the Chicago White Sox. And with spring training performances, we'll discuss Adam Engel's strained hamstring injury. That is pretty significant news for this past week, especially for the White Sox. We'll discuss that during the Outfielders preview. But there are two performances during camp that's catching a lot of eyes from fans and media, and that's starting pitcher Carlos Rodon and catcher Zack Collins. And for Rodon, again, I had very low expectations of him going to 2021, especially what happened in Cleveland last year, Jim, and what obviously happened in Oakland. But he's throwing very well in camp. He's, 9 innings pitched, 4 hits allowed, 0 runs, 0 walks, and he struck out 10. That's phenomenal. I think the big question when it comes to Carlos Rodon is, does this give you confidence that the White Sox would be able to count on Carlos Rodon in the 21 regular season?
It gives me a little bit more confidence. I think with Rodon, there are a few reasons for apprehension. One is the injury history, which is obvious, and the fact that whether he can even be available at all has always been a major question. So that has that has not yet been solved. That may never be solved, and you may kind of hold your breath every time the White Sox don't have an obvious sixth starter candidate behind him. I think the other concern I had was that he would have to rely too much on his slider, that he would be somebody had to pitch backwards most of the time, that his fastball velocity while returning to 93 to 95 was just, he was sacrificing life for velocity and any kind of semblance of command, even if he hasn't been really a pitcher who is featured much in the way of command. I thought he'd have to pitch, maybe 35% sliders to get by, and I didn't know if he had control of that pitch enough to make it a setup pitch as well as a put away pitch. So the fact that he's bullying hitters with this fastball right now, that he's just kind of pumping it by hitters and throwing it, letter high, getting it past them, getting weak foul balls early in the count, able to get swings and misses later in the count. That's something I didn't necessarily see from him being a regular feature. So if he can keep that going, I think that basically changes my mind whether he can be an effective 5-inning pitcher. And then from that point, it's more about whether he can be a 5-inning pitcher for, 5 starts in a row, which has always been a challenge for him for the last few years now.
Yeah, it's great to see this type of performance, but again, it is spring training. We have seen White Sox pitchers perform well in Glendale, and then they go into the regular season, and all of a sudden they're totally different, right? We saw that last year with Dylan Cease coming out of spring training 2.0, where he struck out 9 batters in an inter-squad scrimmage, and everything looks great. The fastball looks great. The slider's on point. First appearance against Cleveland, not good. But for Carlos Rodon, his first appearance, if he is the number 5 starting pitcher, Jim, appears to be against Seattle, which would be the second series of the 2021 season. And it's not like Seattle is going to be a world beater this year. I think a lot of projections have them either finishing last or 4th in the American League West. So that would be a good test for Carlos Rodon, just to see the adjustments that he's been making with Ethan Katz. But I think you do bring up a good point, Jim, as far as in the confidence level and maybe as far as our expectations. Before he even pitched at all at spring training, I think our thinking was, hey, if he can go 3 innings, then you could bring in maybe Michael Kopech for a couple innings and then Garrett Crochet and then go through whoever is available in the bullpen to try to win these games in the 5th starter spot. But it sounds like you have some confidence that maybe he could be counted on for 5+ innings.
Yeah, I think in this current form, my concern from here would be whether he can maintain this current form for an extended period of time. But the fastball command, it looks like it has more life, at least, that's something that's, with spring training camera angles and lack of pitch data, it's really hard to tell. You're more or less going off eye test, but what hitter swings are saying is either one, it's spring training and hitters are just behind, not really picking them up that well, and they will when the regular season rolls around, they get more reps under them, or that it's just a better pitch than it was last year, which could very well be possible.
Yeah, if he's going to be a 5-inning guy, you're just asking him to go through the lineup twice.
Yeah.
If he's effective to go through the lineup twice. I don't know if he's in a spot right now or if the White Sox have the confidence of Carlos Rodon to go through a lineup 3 times like they're going to be asking Giolito, Keuchel, and Lance Lynn, and I think in some ways maybe Dylan Cease. But Carlos Rodon's throwing really well, and you can't argue the results. So hopefully that continues, and maybe he even surprises myself and other White Sox fans to start the 2021 season. But let's go over to Zack Collins. In 15 games, Zack Collins is hitting .333 with a .444 on base percentage, and he's slugging .467. Zack Collins has 6 walks to 3 strikeouts. You wrote a column about this on SoxMachine.com, Jim, that we've never seen this type of performance from Zack Collins, especially on the strikeout front. Jim, is Collins hitting himself onto the opening day 26-man roster?
It seems like it, just based on the way playing time is breaking down. I think with somebody or a position like a catcher, where there's a lot that relies on a catcher working well with pitchers, getting to know what they throw, being able to just game plan for multiple trips to the lineup, that you might see Jonathan Lucroy being more prominently involved, or Yermin Mercedes, getting more reps if it were truly a battle. That Collins is caught so often, even with Yasmani Grandal being out and so many innings being available, that Collins has this kind of lead. It seems like it's hard to find a reason to keep him off. He's not striking out. Like if you were hitting, if he had an OPS of 1,000 or striking out 25% of the time, it'd be easy to chalk it up as a spring mirage, and it still, very well may be. But when he's only striking out 3 times in nearly 40 plate appearances, which he's never done before. Like there's always been a clump of strikeouts just around the corner. Whenever it seems like he's starting to put the bat on the ball more, he has like a silver to platinum sombrero to put him right back on his old track where he was. I think that should be rewarded. And the other thing too is that, we're hearing positive impressions about his working with pitchers, and that's something where, listening to Tony La Russa, watching him on Zoom calls, he's not really saying anything bad about anybody. So I don't think you can take the absence of criticism as the fact that he's doing things well. But the idea that Jerry Narron is there, a catching guru who's had results for multiple catchers at multiple stops along the way, I think that's at least enough for me right now to think something may be different on that front too. So at least Collins may not be demonstrably different. Maybe we're talking about him in May or something like that. He might be the same old Zack Collins, but at least there are a couple things that are different enough to where you're not crossing your fingers. There might actually be something different here.
So with this, let's say this type of reality that Zack Collins does make the 26-man roster, you're expecting the Chicago White Sox to carry 3 catchers and Yasmani Grandal, Jonathan Lucroy, and Zack Collins?
I think with the way Collins is playing now, I think the Lucroy thing comes down to whether Andrew Vaughn is on the opening day roster. If he's the DH, I really don't see a reason why there would be a reason for 3 catchers. Like, you really only have 3 catchers on the roster if Yasmani Grandal needs to DH when he's not catching. Like if they're hitting behind Jose Abreu at first base /DH is so sketchy that you really need all the good bats you can get in the lineup. And I think if Andrew Vaughn's opening day, I think you carry him on the opening day roster to hit every day as a DH first baseman, rotating in and out. So I wouldn't see the utility there for a third catcher, especially and we'll be talking about this, I imagine, that with Adam Engel being sidelined for 2 weeks because of a hamstring strain, that you don't have Larry Garcia's, I think his Swiss Army knife skills will be more limited by what is needed right now.
Well, let's go into our outfield preview and let's address that question. Very nicely done. And as far as the 2021 Chicago White Sox outfield preview, like I mentioned in the intro of the show, this unit has great potential. Luis Robert has the skill set to be a 6+ WAR player in 2021. He can win another Gold Glove, and he can garner some MVP votes for his overall skill. Eloy Jimenez could hit 40+ home runs for the White Sox this season and be one of the most dangerous hitters in all of baseball. But again, this unit is no stranger to the injured list, whether it's Jimenez hurting himself trying to play defense in left field. Luis Robert has a bad slide. Adam Eaton has gone onto the injured list with either nagging or very serious injuries. And now what has happened with Adam Engel, and that's where we're going to start our preview, is Adam Engel has a strained hamstring, and it sounds like that he will start the season on the injured list due to that strained hammy. And Jim, for Adam Engel, how does Adam Engel's injury impact the Chicago White Sox as they quickly approach opening day?
Theoretically, it might not affect them all that much because, thankfully, Larry Garcia is a better hitter as a right-handed hitter. So if you're looking for somebody to complement Adam Eaton as a, in a platoon, then, Garcia, Eaton, Garcia against lefties, Eaton against righties. That's basically, you're not losing all that much. I think where Engel provides more confidence is playing center field if he's needed to play there. And also a bit more power he's shown, which is nice to say about Engel. I mean, he's really come a long way when we were talking about him, throughout the course of his career and treating him as a defensive specialist who really shouldn't be hitting at all. Maybe a late game replacement, somebody you don't want to see. And now at least he's made himself really useful against left-handed bats, and to the point where it's just enjoyable to see him come to the plate, which I can't imagine.
You weren't saying that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, like 2018 me would not believe 2021 me saying that. So that's really cool. So I think it's just, it's weird to say, but it's more of a blow of just like enjoying, not getting to enjoy seeing Adam Engel against lefties, which is fun. Hopefully it's not a nagging issue and persists into the regular season, because I think that's when, you can get in trouble. We've seen that at other positions with Garcia playing center. He's really a nice player to have. Garcia is a nice player to have, like when he only has to play like a week or two at a time, and then just kind of fills into different positions here and there. But if he's counted on to carry a position, that's where it gets dicey. Well, I think that Zip's projection is more reflective of an Adam Engel who has to play every day, no matter the pitcher, a manager who's not playing him to his strengths, but is forced to play him against any arm that's being thrown against the White Sox that day. And when you look at his splits from last year, his plate discipline against righties was really, he struggled in that department against righties. He struck out 16 times against 2 walks over 58 plate appearances. That's a 28% strikeout rate. So when you see that Zips projection of a 28.3% strikeout rate, you think, yeah, that's what he is when he's forced to play in a way that's just exposing him. But against lefties, he only struck out 3 times in 36 plate appearances. So if he's able to, bring up the number of plate appearances against lefties to where that takes, 50% or more of his plate appearances, then I think you're somewhere closer to that 2020 season. And it really won't resemble Zips. It might be somewhere in between. Then I think at that point, assuming there's somebody healthy there to protect him against facing too many righties, the other question would be whether he's, we've talked about this with a few different players, whether his season was reflective of some kind of weird, I guess, level of competition that was in the central divisions and both the AL Central and NL Central that were maybe not reflective of the quality of league at the whole. And maybe he uniquely benefited from that somehow. But it also just could be 60 games. And as we talked about Jose Abreu last time, having a cold 20 and a really hot 40 and riding that to the MVP, like the 60-game sample, while a lot of games it's not quite a small sample, but for a full season it is.
As far as the 36, right? Yeah.
Yes.
The 36 games. Got it. Yeah. Again, he liked to beat up on the Kansas City Royals, which is great. And he'll still get that opportunity in the 2021 season. We'll see how the rest of the league adjusts to Adam Engel. But again, I think he'll exceed those projections. Those projections look very much like 2018 Adam Engel. So again, that's the part of the projections that I look at for the Chicago White Sox and say, I'm confident that Adam Engel will exceed as far as those projections. Let's go with the guy. Let's talk about the guy he's going to be platooning with in right field. And that is Adam Eaton. And the question that I have before we get into the 2021 projections for Adam Eaton, will we see a dead cat bounce from Adam Eaton in 2021? Because his 2020 performance, Jim, was, I have no other way to explain it but bad. I mean, he was below 0 WAR. He had a negative 0.5 WAR with the Washington Nationals last year. His worst offensive season in his career. But evidently with the contract the Chicago White Sox signed Adam Eaton, Rick Hahn's strategy of addressing right field, Hahn is hopeful that there's a bounce back in Adam Eaton's production. How confident are you in a dead cat bounce from Adam Eaton in 2021?
I would say not very, just because the White Sox have struggled with this particular kind of player, not Eaton himself, but just somebody who, right field DH, we've talked about it for years. Rick Hahn has talked about it for years. He's admitted to talking about it for years that somebody like, Eaton, theoretically, he should be an improvement over Nomar Mazara. Nomar Mazara theoretically should have been an improvement over Daniel Palka, and so on and so forth. Just when you have the bar that low, I think it makes it easy to set ambitions low, and then just nothing improves in a detectable manner, and you're just left with just a big pile of meh at best. I think with Eaton, I think the perhaps encouraging thing is that he wasn't terrible against righties. Like a lot of his awful performance last year, talking about small samples, and we talked about Adam Engel being great against lefties. Eaton was terrible against lefties. He went 4 for 39 with 8 strikeouts. That's a 366 OPS, 768 OPS against righties. Even then, the righties was a little bit iffy, but at least that's like a major league line. Somebody you don't mind hitting maybe 8th, 9th. If you're feeling good about a matchup, you can bat him second once in a while. And I think Tony La Russa will, and I think a lot of people will be driven nuts by that. But if he's facing a righty who's not overpowering, I can see that working out. So there are reasons to play him if he has that line, especially if he's a slow starter, which he has been throughout his career, and he pointed to that, saying that he only had a start of a season, that might be one reason to believe in it too. He seems like a player to me, like just watching him play, talking about how he's had to adjust for aging, that, when he's a high effort guy who is somebody who's basically his game is based on, high motor, defense in right field, which has dropped off, and just, trying to get a bunch of hits the way he can, just busting out of the box. Any kind of lost step, I think, is going to hurt him more than most. And I think he might have already lost a step and might be hard for him to regain. If he regains a step, I think it might be hard for him to sustain it over a full year. So I'm not optimistic about him, and I think they could be looking for another upgrade at the deadline.
Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, that would be pretty soon. And I think that would frustrate a lot of people, especially White Sox fans and even media, when we were pretty critical of the signing right away. And looking at the 2021 projections for Adam Eaton, maybe this does qualify as a dead cat bounce from his 2020 season. But in 2021, Zips is projecting 126 games played for Adam Eaton. I think that could be pretty close, with a slash line of 262 for his batting average, his on-base percentage being 339, and slugging 401, giving him a weighted runs created plus of 99, so 1% below league average, so close to league average hitter, with a 1.6 WAR for the 2021 Chicago White Sox. Obviously, I would prefer that the White Sox made a more significant addition in right field moving forward, rather than these 1-year deals hoping for the best. And I think that is the White Sox strategy with right field heading into the 2021 season, Jim, with a Adam Engel and Adam Eaton platoon. And again, already Engel is going to possibly start the season on the injured list because of a strained hamstring. And I did put this question out there for our Twitter followers, one of our first show polls. And the question, Jim, is who will make the most starts in right field for the 2021 Chicago White Sox? And the guys that I listed were Adam Eaton, Adam Engel, Billy Hamilton, and Nick Williams.
I think it's going to be Eaton.
Yeah, 30 so far, 67% of the people that have voted in that poll agree with you that it will be Adam Eaton making the most starts in right field. But let me go back to the question with Adam Eaton. We're expecting a dead cat bounce. Let's say he does play into those 2021 season projections, Jim. Is that a big enough bounce in his production that would satisfy you for the White Sox right field?
I think so. Just based on those numbers and putting it together, the 1 point, a little bit below 2 wins, but for a guy who only plays 126 games, that's decent. That's, I think, what we wanted to see from, that's kind of what Tampa got out of Avi Garcia. When with the White Sox, when they get 2 wins out of Garcia when he plays 150 games, versus a Garcia who gets close to 2 wins at 110 games, and that's because they spare him against pitchers who might exploit him. That's a way to make him useful. And if he has an OBP around 340, that would be great. That's something they can use. Really, they need average or better on base guys. They have a lot of power. We've seen that before. We've talked about for a couple of years now that they have power. Just more of a matter of guys who can, set the table, keep the lineup going, work some extra pitches, make a pitcher face an extra batter in an inning. That's what they've been lacking. Basically, Yasmani Grandal has to go a long way, and Andrew Vaughn, when he comes up, a lot will be demanded of them in order to keep pitchers honest, make them work hard, not have 7-pitch innings every once in a while. So I think if Eaton provides a 340 OBP the way he does when he's in the box, I think that's useful for this particular team. And I think that more or less verifies what Rick Hahn had in mind, setting up the middle of the order or setting up the top of the order if he's batting 8th or 9th.
Yeah, and you go back to that walk rate. In 2020, for XYZ reason, Adam Eaton wasn't taking his walks. He had a walk rate below 6%. That's not Adam Eaton when you look at his career. So I think that's going to be one of the numbers I'm going to be paying attention to, Jim, for Adam Eaton, is because can he have a walk rate of 8% or better? 8% is not great. The best hitters in the league that take their walks and are patient have a walk rate better than 10%. I'm not expecting that from Adam Eaton, but if he could be 8% or better, even that little bit of a boost in walking potential for the Chicago White Sox will go a long way. Because again, this team, man, I can't imagine this lineup without Yasmani Grandal or Andrew Vaughn in it. Just wouldn't walk at all.
Yeah.
So they have to earn their way to get on base as far as hits. And, some fans enjoy that aspect. They don't like to watch hitters take their walks. But in order to be one of the best offenses in Major League Baseball, which the 2021 Chicago White Sox are hoping to be one of the best offenses in the league, they're going to have to walk a lot more than they currently do.
Yeah, Fangraphs had Adam Eaton swinging outside the zone 36.5% of pitches. He'd never – I'm looking at his rate now. The top his highest out-of-swing percentage is 31.1, so he's 5% higher than his previous career high in terms of chasing pitches. The contact elsewhere was more or less normal. He's just really a lot more aggressive on all sorts of pitches, but especially on pitches outside the zone. So maybe that's something where – he sometimes does that early in seasons, like, in April and May, and takes a while to settle in and eventually find his groove and learn his limitations for that given year, given how he's feeling. But, and maybe, having only 60 games and having no postseason, I guess, made him pressing to try to straighten his season out as quickly as he could. And that just let him press more. Maybe I can buy into that a little bit. But just, when it comes to solutions like this for Rick Hahn, you always have to, when in situations where you have to squint and say, maybe he won't be that bad, or maybe he'll stop doing this thing that killed him. It's like, typically that doesn't happen. Usually the thing, like Edwin Encarnacion last year, we're talking about how he's popping up the ball more and just becoming more home run reliant, and the average is dropping, and we're crossing our fingers like, maybe this will be the case where he can just hold on for one more year, and he couldn't. So I think when it comes to these solutions for previous years, I just don't get my hopes up, and I make them prove it. And so I want there to be a punishment for being reflexively pessimistic here.
If I told you in October of 2020, after the season, that Billy Hamilton will be on the opening day Chicago White Sox roster, what would be your train of thought just hearing that possibility?
Just something like an outfield collision happened and knocked out two of them.
Well, I mean, that is a possibility with this.
And that's kind of happened already twice already, but just something like, just I'm thinking like the Maglia or Ordonez type collision where somebody shredded a kneecap or something like that. Just something terrible where just all of a sudden they're looking for any bodies they could find. I think, it's just, I don't mind Hamilton like in Charlotte. Just I don't like how much playing time he's getting right now. And it makes me a bit nervous. And I think that's also reflective of just how little the incumbent Charlotte/Birmingham outfielders have impressed that, Nick Williams is not enough. Yeah.
That Luis Gonzalez, the Blake Rutherford, the Micker Adolfo, that trio, right? Mm-hmm. That you're alluding to. Yeah, it is. It has been a bit disappointing, especially since we were so excited a few years ago about the potential of this group.
The Birmingham logjam.
Yeah, the Birmingham logjam. This would be their opportunity. And because of the lack of development, the White Sox are more confident signing journeyman Billy Hamilton, who's got one skill, which is speed, on the offensive side, may now have to be on the opening day roster to start the season because Adam Engel is hurt. And once Engel is healthy, maybe they'll swap out Hamilton for Adam Engel. We'll see how that situation goes. But never thought I'd say this, but Adam Engel, the White Sox need you. So heal up as quickly as you can. One of our show polls, I asked as far as our listeners and followers, over under for Eloy Jimenez in 2021. Again, Zips would say the under. Zips is projecting 34 home runs for Eloy Jimenez in 2021. But I think Jimenez will exceed 34. And the number that I thought in my head that would be a good over under is 37 and a half home runs for Eloy Jimenez in 2021. There are many White Sox fans, Jim, that have placed futures bets on Eloy Jimenez to win the Major League Baseball home run crown in 2021. So they would say way over. But how about you? How do you feel if I said over under 37.5 home runs for Eloy Jimenez in 2021?
Are you including Treasy 74 projection?
Yeah, that might be influencing some folks.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would influence you.
No, I think it doesn't. I don't respond to peer pressure well, so I'm going to say under. No, I just think with the under, it's not necessarily a knock on him. It's just I can see multiple ways where he doesn't get there. I can't see him, hitting 45 in a season. I don't think it's unreasonable. But I think between the ground balls, between the sliders, and between his tendency to miss a couple weeks at a time, just with muscle pull or maybe an outfield collision, a wall collision, something along those lines, to where I just feel like you'd be counting on him playing 150 games to beat that number, and that's one of the two ways where I can see him falling short.
The club record for most home runs in a season is still Albert Bell, right? 49
yes. Mm-hmm.
in 1990. Is it 6?
7.
7. Thank you. Yeah. 1997. So 49 home runs. For the hitters that are in this lineup, do you think Eloy Jimenez has the best shot out of all the hitters in this lineup to break Albert Bell's single season record?
No, it was 1998. So
1998.
Yeah, it was the second year he was there. So yeah, 1998. Before I just wanted to look that up before people start screaming at it. I do think that's the case, just because, when we talk about Jose Abreu, he's a gifted hitter. And I think that means that he's also gifted in like the sense of knowing what he can't pull out of the yard and not trying to do too much with pitches. And I think, being a 50 home run guy means you try to do as much with the pitch as possible. And sometimes to the detriment of other pitches. I think he's more of just an all fields hitter, and especially as he gets older, and he's not going to try to pull the ball in the stands all the time. He can go hot and cold. I think, Luis Robert isn't quite there yet with the strikeouts, even though he's probably just as strong as anybody on the team. So when it comes to like ability to get the barrel of the ball and put a bunch of pitches over the fence, not just one, not mistakes, but, reaching out, poking a slider over the right field wall because he's that strong, I think he can get the most homers out of his bat. So yeah, I think he could theoretically get there. I'd want to see 1 year of like just having the ground ball slider problem before feeling that. But if he's surprised, like, I don't think it's a bad bet. Like if you put a small amount of money on it, getting, like amount of money you didn't care about, to where you're not just like, if he hits 47 homers and you want to throw your couch to the window out of anger, like that's I think the wrong way to follow his season. 47 homers is great, but yeah. just in terms of his strength and ability to hit pitches hard, I think he's probably the most likely to get there.
Well, you mentioned him already, so our last outfielder to preview on this episode is Luis Robert. And when it comes to Luis Robert, the question for a lot of White Sox fans is, will the September 2020 slump help Robert in 2021, knowing on how pitchers adjusted to him after a tremendous August, where Robert, you could have made the case that he should be MVP of the American League. He was playing so well. Mm-hmm. And then September tremendously cooled off as opposing pitchers and opposing teams started to attack Robert in a different manner. And it was nice to see Robert perform well in the postseason series against Oakland, where he had that mammoth home run in Game 3. Do you think that the slump in September of last year will help Luis Robert in his preparation and getting a better understanding of how teams will attack him early in 2021?
I think so, and I think I have to say that in order to be logically consistent, because when I was stumping for him, or for the White Sox to call him up in 2019, August and September, one of the reasons I wanted him to was because I wanted him to fail in the major leagues. Well, I didn't want him to fail, but like I wanted the failure to be there to happen in a season where there weren't stakes, where there weren't like expectations, results of games, pennant chases / postseason appearances, riding on his ability to make quick adjustments against the best stuff he's ever faced, given his history, his track record of just being very aggressive and not failing yet with that approach. So, if I was to say that like a poor performance or an uneven performance in September 2019 would help him in 2020, then I have to say that a poor September 2020, a very tough to watch September, will benefit him come April.
And for Luis Robert, let's take a look at his 2021 season projections from Zips. And again, in 2020, in 56 games, Luis Robert had a 1.5 WAR for the White Sox. His weighted runs created plus was 101, so right around league average. But when you look at the slash line, especially where he ended compared to where he was in August, this is where it gets a bit disappointing. He hit 233 with a 302 on base percentage and slugged 436 to end the 2020 season. Now, going into 2021, Zips is expecting a little bit of a boost in offensive production. In 135 games, Zips is projecting a 264 batting average for Robert with a 312 on base percentage and slugging 482 with a weighted runs created plus of 107. So 7% better than league average and a 3.3 WAR. I think a lot of that is part of the offensive boost, but again, he is a Gold Glover center fielder, and it'll be a very interesting race again between he and the Minnesota Twins' Byron Buxton on who will win that award in center field going into the 2021 season. And Jim, when you're looking at the 2021 projections for Luis Robert, again, this is a player that has such a high ceiling. What is something that you're going to be paying attention to early to determine how successful Robert can be this upcoming year?
Well, I think when I look at those 2021 projections, that I think I would take, just because I think his season is going to be a lot of mini Augusts and mini Septembers. I think stretched out over the course of 162 games. Like, I think he's going to have, 1 or 2 week stretches where he just looks completely lost. And then he eventually figures out, looks at some video, whether taking extra practice, just setting out a game, just somehow, something clicks to where he's able to stay back, recenter the zone and not get himself out, and then just his tools take over. The exit velocity tips up. The strength comes back into play. The infield singles, even when he doesn't showcase his strength, just his ability to beat out routine-looking grounders, I think, is also something that will buoy his value a little bit. I think that'll come back and he'll look like a world beater, look like an all-star, and I think that's just going to be the push and pull of the entire season, is just managing that aggression and not letting that be used against him. And I think just his track record is so, as a fully healthy player, I should say, is so short and so smooth up the ascension, from Winston-Salem to Birmingham to Charlotte, that I expected there to be some rough patches. And I think, given the COVID season being a whole different brand of baseball, and 2021 is going to be different for a lot of reasons than the 2020 season, I can see just further adjustments need to be made. So while I can see him being like a, perhaps, maybe not quite, Tony La Russa dropped the Mike Trout comparison just in terms of his tools. I think the plate discipline is going to hold him back, but just somebody who's, you always feel good about being there, or maybe just game at a time might look rough, but somebody you think can always just turn a game around. I don't think that guy is quite there yet. I think that might need a year or two before he just sees enough of the league and learns what he can't do in order to just showcase what he can do more often.
And the show poll for Luis Robert, over under again, this time again with home runs. Just like with Eloy Jimenez, we discussed over under on 37.5 home runs for Jimenez. A little bit lower at value, but I think that this is a good number to debate whether or not Luis Robert can exceed it or he'll fall short of it. And that's 28.5 home runs for Luis Robert in the 2021 season, Jim. Are you going to go over or under that total?
I'll break character and go over, just because I can see that column being good to him, even if some other columns are off, even if he doesn't walk, or even if he goes a long time without a walk, the strikeouts spike on him. I can see him occasionally running into one, even during the cold patches. And then when he gets on a roll, just maybe having a week where he hits 5 out and, staying healthy, he gets there. I can see maybe some other columns like, having a weird extra base hit assortment, perhaps, kind of like an Edwin Encarnacion type stretch where he hits homers and nothing but. And Encarnacion would have hit 30 homers last year. He also would have, I think, set a record for lowest average based on qualifying plate appearances. But I can see him doing that even if other areas are lacking. So I think I'm going to say, like, I could, list reasons why he wouldn't, but I think I do that too often. So I'm going to say he hits like in the low 30s.
Yeah, 30 is the number that popped in my head when it came to Luis Robert and thinking about as far as his 2021 season. Again, he's got to stay healthy though, right? In order for him to hit 30 home runs, I'm thinking he's going to play 145 plus games for the White Sox. If Robert could play 155 games for the White Sox in 2021, the White Sox will greatly benefit because, again, Robert is such a unique player that impacts the game in so many ways. And before we conclude as far as the outfield preview, I think we're getting a sense that Eloy Jimenez will bat fifth. And there'll be some days that Adamine could bat second or he'll bat eighth in the lineup. But for Luis Robert, where do you think Tony La Russa is going to pencil Robert into his lineup?
I would say somewhere in the back half, like sixth or seventh. There's a little bit too much power to bat him ninth. He's not really somebody who, I think La Russa, when looking at his National League history and batting the pitcher eighth, I think he believes in the second leadoff hitter a lot. The power of the ninth spot, getting on base for the top of the order versus having the pitcher batting ninth and having nobody on board for your best hitters. So I don't think he'll be ninth. I think, sixth or seventh, depending on maybe the handedness or, the power of the pitcher, especially if somebody if there's a slider monster on the mound and Robert just doesn't seem like a good play, he might just bat. I can see him sneaking to eighth then, in the pitcher spot where La Russa might bat him and then hope for just occasional power from there. I think also La Russa could just try to bat him first. I think, looking at his history of, managing, it seems like La Russa tries a lot of whims, tries a lot of things to break guys out of slump or break guys into the lineup. And, I remember Jim Leyland when he was with Detroit doing that too, like taking a rookie and batting him first, like getting him a leadoff spot and saying like, well, you're a major leaguer, bat a major league spot. And, fans would freak out, and maybe it will work out for that given game. But I think it's just he used lineups as a way to send messages and to try to instill confidence and try to shake things up, get guys out of a certain mindset. And I think La Russa is going to do the same thing where he's just going to try, shaking things up, see how things look. Some fans who might think of, looking at guys who are on a roll and saying like, why are you batting him second when he's batting fifth? He was batting great fifth. I think they're going to be driven nuts. But, for a White Sox lineup that I think or a White Sox, both lineup and I would say lineup card, when you include positions, that I think was too rigid and too unwilling to experiment both with lineups and with batting orders and defensive alignments, defensive positioning, whether it's like playing an infielder in the outfield, trying that out just to increase flexibility. I don't mind seeing more experimentation and having guys bat where they shouldn't, as long as, it's not a habit. It's not, you're not hearing a deft handling of the bat from the second spot for somebody with a 310 OBP and no power. Like, that's what I don't want to hear. But if, Nick Madrigal bats first one time, then he bats ninth, then he bats second, then he bats eighth, if he kind of floats around the lineup just based on La Russa wanting to get looks, especially early in the season, I don't mind that.
Yeah, I think 6 is a good spot for Luis Robert. If you have Tim Anderson, and let's say Yasmani Grandal is batting second, Jose Abreu is batting third, Yohan Moncada is batting fourth, Eloy Jimenez is batting fifth. I like Robert at 6th. If you have Vaughn 7th, I think that's a good spot for him. Then you have Adam Eaton batting 8th when he's in the game, and then Nick Madrigal batting 9th, in the sense that you have if Eaton can walk, and Madrigal, as Lucas Giolito calls him, Merlin, because he's got a magic wand for a baseball bat. If those two could continue to get themselves on base, that really bodes well when you get the lineup turned over, and it gives Tim Anderson RBI opportunities. And we talked about him in our previous episode of the podcast that he has the potential to hit 25 plus home runs. And this is where you could easily see a lineup in 2021 for the Chicago White Sox score 850, maybe 900 plus runs in a 162 game campaign. We haven't seen this type of offense in a while. Maybe it could rival even the 2000 Chicago White Sox, which was the best offensive squad in White Sox history. And that's very exciting. And I think if Luis Robert can live up a little bit more to his potential, and he's a guy that's batting sixth and hitting 30 home runs for you, Jim, you get closer to that mark.
Yeah, I think they're going to look like that sometimes. I think they're going to have weeks or stretches, series at a time where they look like world beaters, and then some pitchers who can keep them quiet just because there are still some flaws in this lineup that can be exploited. Sure. So I think, maybe 800 runs, I think I would set my calibration there. And then, I think there's room to beat that just if guys click earlier than I think. But just based on the plate discipline issues and still trying to figure out whether they have enough against good right-handed pitching. I think I'm going to be, I've heard that a lot, like watching spring training feeds, like this White Sox lineup is loaded. They're so dangerous, power from everywhere, and just, not seeing it quite in spring training results. And, there's a reason, I think there's reasons for that. And it's just, some of it's spring things, but also I think there are some pitchers that can keep them quiet where, say if it's a series where another team lines up its pitchers and then they walk away saying like, I don't get why everybody's raving about the White Sox. I think there are going to be series like that maybe drag down the average number of runs scored, but I think there are going to be series where they just beat the hell out of another team and just they'll be glad to see the White Sox leave.
Yeah, we got questions from our fans and listeners regarding the Chicago White Sox spring training offensive performance and other questions as well. So let's answer them next in PO Sox.
You've stuffed our mailbox all week with questions from your tweets and Facebook posts. Now to cure your curiosity on the White Sox, here is PO Sox.
Thanks, Rob. And yes, this is our favorite part of the show where you, our fans and listeners, get to ask the questions. It's PO Sox, where you submitted your questions to us via Twitter by following us on Twitter at Sox Machine. But this week's mailbag come from our Patreon supporters. And thank you guys so much for your continued support at patreon.com/Sox Machine. And Jim, let's get into the first question in PO Sox, and it comes from AJ. And AJ is asking a question that we were just talking about when it comes to the White Sox offense. And his question is, am I wrong to be slightly worried about the hitting during spring training?
I would say I wouldn't be worried about spring training being reflective of the White Sox quality as a whole, just because when we look at the lineup, especially like the performances of Yasmani Grandal and Jose Abreu getting late starts, getting up to speed, like that doesn't seem characteristic of what they're going to do. Like say when the season's starting to warm up, like in May and such, and the 162 game groove comes back into play, and I think players get recentered. I do think it's a little bit of like I was talking about, just you can see maybe how the lineup's lack of walks, the plate discipline issues, like when say Grandal is not in the lineup or Andrew Vaughn is not in the lineup, where that can just lead to quick innings, unimpressive outs. They're in the bottom third of walk rate. They're also, I will say, they're in the bottom third of strikeout rate, which I think is an improvement, just because they did strike out the second most of any American League team last year. So I think that helps a little bit. But when you have the bottom third walk rate and then you have like Grandal not there and you have Vaughn not there, I think that can just lead to innings where you just, as we're talking about, where you hear all the raves about the White Sox offense and they go quietly and you think, well, they were oversold. So I think right. I wouldn't be worried. I wouldn't take too much meaning in the spring training results as being reflective of how, they're going to, be averaging 3 runs a game in April. Like, I don't think it's going to project that smoothly, but I think it's a preview of some weeks where you're going to be frustrated by them and where they may not be able to get separation from the Twins or the Indians early on when you think that they could be, maybe AL Central favorites.
Yeah, I know Tim Anderson /line is not pretty anymore during spring training. Jose Abreu has yet to hit a home run during spring training. I could understand for White Sox fans looking at those two players in particular and being concerned. But again, it is spring training. Good performances, bad performances doesn't mean that they're going to carry over into the regular season. I will have to say, though, if you're striking out a lot during the spring training, you're probably going to be striking out a lot during the regular season. And hopefully, fingers crossed, these walk rates also carry with the White Sox into the regular season. And, one of those players we just talked about, Luis Robert, having 10 strikeouts to 1 walk. That's probably on par of what we can expect from Robert during the regular season. But I like going back to this. If you want to be optimistic or you're searching for optimism from the White Sox offense, Yohan Moncada looks good, Jim. And he has as many walks as strikeouts, and he appears to be healthy, back closer to his 2019 form, I dare to say. Physically, I should say, is 2019 form, because he's running hard down the first baseline. Maybe he's going at 90%, but he wasn't able to do that last year. So again, as far as watching spring training, I watch the games because they are fun and it's good to see baseball. And yes, I am also looking at a lens of analyzing this team. And here are some things that we should talk about as far as a fan base and what we should be focusing on going into the regular season. But I'm not too concerned with some of the lackluster offensive performances during spring training. And in some ways, there are parts of the offensive performances that I'm more optimistic about what this unit could do once opening day comes.
That's more or less where I'm at. There's too rich of a history of just dwelling on bad springs, getting hyped about good springs, and just not having materialized to where, given that the lineup is set, given that there aren't a whole lot of positional battles up top, to where I think you have to trust that they're getting work in. And if it, come late April, come, Mother's Day, we'll say, if you do see some guys lagging behind, if Grandal and Abreu don't heat up, if Tim Anderson's having hitting the low 200s, kind of like he did in his first few full seasons in the majors, then I think you might look back in the spring training and reverse engineer it and say, like, what happened? How can you try to, but I think that's more or less right now, based on just our knowledge of it, when there aren't major strikeout issues underlying the struggles, that just more or less coincidental, or guys getting work in. And that's just the line that's, while they're getting the reps, the line is what it is.
Well, AJ, thank you so much for your question. Our next question in the mailbag comes from Andrew Weber. And Andrew's asking, our bullpen is ridiculously talented. Do you see a potential trade later in the season where the Chicago White Sox pick up a win-now player in exchange for some bullpen depth?
I don't see that this year, just because, I think one of the themes from spring training so far is that while the bullpen, the top of the bullpen, Liam Hendricks, Aaron Bummer, Cody Hoyer, that sector of the bullpen looks great and dangerous and deep and very flexible. You add in Garrett Crochet and Michael Kopech, if they're your sixth inning guys, if they're your seventh inning guys, if Crochet is your backup weapon lefty, then that's a deep bullpen. But I think, behind those guys, we're the Zach Birdie tier, Jimmy Cordero, while a lot of people were done with Jimmy Cordero at the end of the year, I think, Rick Renteria used him. He overused him. He played a strength into a weakness. And now Cordero is out with Tommy John surgery. That hurts just in terms of depth, in terms of just having a guy come in and get out somewhere. He's helpful. I think there's a separation between, you have Jimmy Cordero, you have Jose Ruiz, guys with good stuff, guys who can occasionally look good, but Jimmy Cordero has gotten outs in the majors. Jose Ruiz has never done that consistently. I think that's where replacement level comes in for a reliever, and Cordero is above it, Ruiz is below it, just because of that ability to get outs, whether it's missing bats, whether it's getting the weak part of bats. I think that's Cordero's strength, and that strength will not be there in any kind of capacity this year because of Tommy John surgery. Zach Birdie showing what he showed last year, some devastating pitches, and then some pitches that just spin and get hammered. And then Tyler Johnson still having problems throwing strikes with his new mechanics, like the mechanics that he added in the Arizona Fall League of 2019, and really threw his walk numbers off. He was in the alternate training site, but didn't surface as a candidate during the 2020 season. Now 2021 was not impressive so far. He was part of the 6 walks in a row. He issued 3 of those 6 walks. So I'm not really counting on him. I was bullish on him when he looked like just a kind of a sheer force of reliever. But I think, I'm wondering if they, trying to get his, well, I should say they were trying to rework his mechanics in order to prevent injury because he did have the lat strain. So maybe that's a case where he could have been effective, but also hurt with his previous mechanics. And now he's healthier, but less effective. Neither way to get to the same spot where he's really not able to add to a bullpen. But either way, that tier of relievers, I think not being there makes it hard to trade a guy like Aaron Bummer, even if like an Aaron Bummer trade, like, should there somehow be like a case where they can deal a Hoyer or a Bummer, like that could bring back a lot. We've seen like in previous years, I'm thinking like the Andrew Miller or Roldis Chapman, Brad Hand trades where you get like a team's top prospect, like a top 50 prospect back. Like theoretically, that would be pretty useful for this team, especially given their weaknesses in the outfield and some areas of their depth chart. But I think with the bullpen being as important as it is for September and October, like pennant races and beyond, and with Tony La Russa really prioritizing those innings, I think it's going to be hard to deal from that as long as there is no wave of relievers behind Bummer, Hoyer, Crochet, Hendricks, to where you feel good about like you can deal one of those guys and not pay for it later.
Yeah, I think you got to maintain your depth because you never know, right? June comes along and 2 of those guys that you mentioned, Jim, are on the injured list. And now all of a sudden you're really leaning into the depth that you have in AAA just to get through as far as that part of the first half of the 2021 season. So
I should say Evan Marshall too. I left his name out, but yeah, he's in the mix as well. But also he's somebody who misses time. So that's why you have to protect against missing time.
Right, exactly. I say you maintain this bullpen depth. Maybe it's something you could address in the offseason. If there's a team that really covets Cody Hoyer and they think that, hey, he could be our closer, you can maybe have that type of conversation in the offseason. But during the season, I say the White Sox hold on to everyone because they do have a luxury, and that is a very good bullpen to start the season. But our final P.O. Sox question comes from As in Rec, Jim. And As in Rec is asking which organizational player making an appearance for the MLB club will have you shaking your fist at Rick Hahn for neglecting organizational depth.
I think it would be probably Billy Hamilton. I think just because, I could see it being Billy Hamilton or like Luis Gonzalez, the Birmingham logjam, just because knew that over the course of the previous 2 years that the minor league, the incumbent talent wasn't getting there and they needed more help and they didn't quite do it. I think like Nick Williams, he's fine for a AAA outfielder, like a journeyman kind of bouncing around because he has hung in the major leagues for a little bit at a time. He does solve the handedness issue a little bit. He's got, he can do a little bit of everything to where if he had to stand in the corner for a couple weeks, you can see it working out, running into some pitches, getting some production, not minding having him around. And then you, just after like 2 weeks here, waiting for regression just to kind of hammer him into the ground. But I think Billy Hamilton is just like, picking him up from another roster and then somehow like showing up in April is just, that'd be, especially like when you have like Garcia, who's fine, when you have Engel, who's fine, and just like doing the things he does. And as we saw with Gerard Dyson last year, and although it's a different manager who might make better use of Hamilton's skill set than like Rick Renteria did with Dyson, like we just saw how little that does when you need more help. When you just like the bat to do something besides just, when you have speed, but you need that speed to get on base. Like you see just how little that does. So I think that's the one where I'd just be miffed. Like, why is he here? Like I'm thinking like Jimmy Lambert, if he had to start, like I like Lambert enough to where I could see him having sneaky success early on. Jonathan Stever, I don't quite get, but at least I saw it happen in the minors to where you can see why the White Sox like him. But just Hamilton, him being there is kind of the desperation that I don't like seeing. That tends to lead to the White Sox like throwing players against the wall. And when they throw players against the wall, I think I tend to throw things as well.
I did ask this question on Twitter. How many bases do you think Billy Hamilton could steal in AAA, like 50, 75, 100. And there were some folks that pointed out that he stole more than 100 bases a couple of years down to the minor leagues. But also, my followers astutely pointed out you can't steal first base in major leagues. And with Hamilton, if he is on the 26-man roster, like if Yasmani Grandal with the extra inning and the runner on second rule in the 10th inning, the White Sox are the home team and Grandal made the last out, so he would technically be the runner on second, then yeah, all right, put Billy Hamilton at second base. But those situations are so unique and they don't happen so often that it just like, why are you carrying this guy for this, this situation that you may run into 3 times a season?
Yeah, it's an expanded roster move. It's a September move. It's an October move when you have fewer starters necessary, and you can use every roster spot for every advantage possible. Like Terrence Gore, like the Terrence Gore way of life. That's what we're talking about. I think, Billy Hamilton, like I was thinking about a stolen base total at Charlotte. Like I could see him like, stealing 40 or 50 just because he can take advantage of, lesser experienced players, lesser catchers. And because he gets bored, just wanting to do it because just to kind of just play with his skills basically. But when it comes to like his ability, I would also think like maybe he wouldn't run just because he needs to stay healthy, like just the wear and tear of stealing bases. Like he knows what his ticket is to the big leagues. He knows like if there's an emergency, if they need a defender, if somehow the outfield depth is enough where they need a guy who can cover center and steal a base, like he can do that. Like he doesn't need to show, he's shown enough in his major leagues, his resume, his minor league track record to where like, he can run. Like he doesn't need to show he can run anymore. So if he wants to ease up on the head first slides and just wait for a break, I can see him doing that too.
That's a good point. But as in rec, thank you so much for your question. And thank you to everyone that submitted questions this week for PO Sox. If you have a question or topic that you'd like Jim and I tackle on a future episode of the Sox Machine podcast, again, follow us on Twitter. We are at Sox Machine. You can also help support us on patreon.com/Sox Machine. And on Patreon, we have 4 different levels now of support: $2, $3, $5, and $10 a month. We have a lot of Patreon supporters that have boosted as far as their monthly support, which is terrific. Thank you guys so much for doing that. Because at the 5 war and 10 war, you get the opportunity to take advantage of our new swag, like the Sox Machine hoodies and the Sox Machine pennants. And this would be a good time, Jim. Is there any updates on the Sox Machine hoodie? I'm wearing mine right now. And it is so comfy. I feel like I'm Mr. Rogers, with like it's just so comfy. So again, wrong side, the logo here, very comfy. And is there any update? Because I know we sold out right away.
Yeah, I'd wear mine more, except I have a puppy in the house and he's already destroyed a couple shirts with teeth and nails. So I want to hold on to it. So I tend to wear the stuff I don't care about as much. If I, holes it, fine. Yeah, if it has paint stains on it, I tend to use those clothes right now. But the hoodie order I placed last week, so the batch should come in around the week of opening day, some point during there, and all the back order / pre-orders, I'll fulfill those immediately. And then I'll put the rest on for sale. I ordered a few extras at each size. So if you didn't get in the order, I'll reopen the ordering page on the Sox Machine store. Maybe I'll wait for a podcast time to make sure everybody hears about it in order to make sure both listeners, readers, social media followers all hear about it around the same time. And then it's just may the gods be with you at that point, because we only have just a handful each size after that.
Yeah. So again, go to patreon.com/Sox Machine to sign up today. We have 4 different tiers that you could partake in. And also Patreon supporters for Sox Machine, you guys get exclusive content every single week. I've been doing the Major League Baseball draft report. This upcoming week, I'm going to list who I think are the top 5 pitchers in this upcoming class and the top 5 position players after a couple months of college baseball and high school baseball ramping up with their schedule. So you get that type of content exclusively by being a Patreon supporter. And you also get an ad-free version of the Sox Machine podcast by being a Patreon supporter. So again, that's patreon.com/Sox Machine to sign up today. That will do it for this Sox Machine podcast episode. A reminder, you can follow us on Twitter. We are at Sox Machine. Something new, you can subscribe to our Sox Machine YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. And if you just discovered the podcast, you can subscribe to the podcast via Spotify, Apple Podcasts, radio.com, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball. Alongside Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.